son. Hide him aboard.
Aye, aye, sir.
Fire dress ship. Very good, sir. Dress ship.
A Brief History of Man's Maritime Mastery. Chapter 21. The Original Maritime Steampunks. "Ship on fire, sir. Starboard bow." The shout rang across the deck of the British Review cruiser Kite. The captain grabbed his glass, steadied himself against the brisk Irish wind, and took a long, hard look. No doubt about it," he declared. "Bring her up. Head for the smoke, poor devils. Fire at sea is the worst thing you could have." The cruiser bounded through the gray, choppy waters off the Irish coast. But the burning ship continued its defiant flight, smoke belching intermittently into the cold air as if the fire was finding fresh fuel at every turn. Her wake was odd, irregular, a curious beating of the water, unlike the clean, sharp lines left by most ships. It took a shot or two across her bow to finally bring her to a halt. To the astonishment of the British crew, she proved to be an American steamship, the Savannah. Built in New York in 1818, the Savannah was an unassuming vessel, just 100 feet long and fitted with a peculiar auxiliary steam engine and paddle wheels that could be folded up and stowed away when not in use. She carried 60 tons of coal and some cordwood to feed her boilers, but she used steam power for only about 80 hours during her 29-day Atlantic crossing. Her captain, Moses Rogers, was a practical man. He had no intention of wasting the wind with this newfangled contraption. The engine, he figured, was for harbors and calms, providing a meager top speed of only 5 knots, hardly a replacement for the steady, dependable power of sail. Many thought the idea was simply absurd. Why put a space-wasting engine in a ship that sailed perfectly well under canvas? Why carry expensive fuel to do what the wind did for free? Paying for motion at sea? Simply ludicrous. Yet the Savannah crossed the Atlantic, hoping to stir some interest in Liverpool. She tried her luck in St. Petersburg, Russia, before returning home under sail. Her steam engine was removed, and she resumed life as a simple coasting packet. Few realized that at the time, almost by accident, she had marked the opening of a new epoch in maritime history. The Savannah was the first vessel to dare to venture across the ocean with her hull crammed with heavy machinery, using steam power at sea. But steam was no overnight marvel. It had been a long time coming, as far back as ancient Alexandria. A philosopher and mathematician named Heron experimented with a simple steam turbine. He described how steam could blow a horn, how the pressure of heated air could open temple doors. In the 17th century, a Frenchman named Salomon de Caus realized that if steam had the force to drive water up a tube, it might just move ships across the sea. His English contemporary, David Ramsay, imagined steam driving boats upon the waters, swift in calms, safer in storms, more reliable than any sail. But it would take a Scotsman, James Watt, to make the steam engine a reality. In 1765, he produced an effective steam engine, thanks to his innovative separate condenser that allowed the piston to do more than just pump water. By 1780, James Pickard's invention of a connecting rod and crank system meant the steam engine was finally ready to take to the water. Enter John Fitch, a Connecticut Yankee with bold predictions that sailing ships would soon give way to steam-driven vessels on the Atlantic. He had dreams of building a steam carriage, but with roads in terrible condition, he turned to steamboats instead. His first idea? An engine linked to 12 vertical oars that dipped in and out of the water like a duck's feet. As 6 paddles are raised from the water, 6 more enter. His initial vision never hit the water, and his riverboat that did eventually set out on the Delaware was propelled by stern paddles instead. Fitch advertised for passengers, but few came. He sought backers in France, but found none. His inventiveness brought him no riches, only poverty. Still, he held fast to his belief in steamships, even as he fell into despair. Sadly, he eventually took his own life in Kentucky, dying with his friends and family claiming he was a well-meaning madman. Crazy, perhaps, but visionaries often are. John Fitch's stubborn dreams of steamships would not die with him. Others would carry the torch forward, and soon the world would see an era of ships, powered not by the whim of the wind, but by the relentless force of steam. In 1802, a small tug named the Charlotte Dundas churned her way along the Forth and Clyde Canal, linking the two great Scottish rivers. She towed two barges behind her, powered by a single paddle wheel turning through a well at her stern. On her trial run, she moved a steady 3 miles per hour, a speed that seemed modest, but which carried the promise of a revolution. The Charlotte Dundas was a creation of William Symington, a Scottish inventor who had been experimenting with steamboats for years. His early designs were clumsy, built around a primitive open-top steam cylinder. These pistons rose under steam pressure and then would fall back by gravity, tugging at two chains hitched to a revolving drum. It was an awkward system, nothing like the refined crankshaft that would eventually drive the Charlotte Dundas. This little tug was so successful, in fact, that the canal owners, fearful for their horse-drawn barges, complained about the wash she created and hounded her off the water. Symington, the frustrated inventor of a perfectly workable steamboat, died also in poverty. But the story of steam was far from over. Across the Atlantic, a man of broad talents and endless curiosity was about to take his turn at the helm of history. His name was Robert Fulton, a Pennsylvanian of Irish descent, a civil engineer, painter, and inventor. Fulton painted landscapes, one of which was likely the world's first panorama. He wrote a book on canals and even designed an early submarine, the Nautilus, which he demonstrated before a commission appointed by Napoleon himself. Fortunately for the British at Trafalgar, the French did not buy. Turning his gaze to steamboats, Fulton built a modestly successful vessel in France before returning to America to construct the now famous North River steamboat, often referred to as the Clermont. Fulton's path was never easy. Beset by troubles, he recalled, never a single word of encouragement or bright hope or warm wish crossed my path. And yet, against all odds, the Clermont was finally ready for her trial trip up the Hudson River to Albany. Scoffers lined the bank, eager to laugh at Fulton's folly. But as the boiler hissed and the pistons groaned, the Clermont began to move. Her paddles dipped steadily into the water, smoke belching from her funnel. One farmer took a quick look and ran home to tell his wife he'd seen the devil himself on his way to Albany, disguised as a sawmill on the water. Witnesses to her night passage on that 32-hour trip described a monster moving against the wind and tide, breathing flames and smoke. Sailors on other vessels cowered as she came on at a pace of 4.5 miles per hour. The Clermont made her first run in August 1807, and for 7 years she plied the waters of the Hudson, the first commercially successful steamship. She blazed the trail for dozens more, riverboats and tugs that soon churned up and down American inland waters. This, the Americans said, is where steam is needed. On rivers, not oceans, where sails will still do just fine. The conservatives often scoffed. No steamer could possibly make regular transatlantic voyages. But across the Atlantic, the British disagreed. 2 years after the Savannah's voyage home, they sent the auxiliary full-rigged ship Rising Star around Cape Horn to Valparaiso, making her the first steamship to enter the Pacific. How much she relied on her 2-cylinder engine, no one knows, but Britain's ambition did not stop there. They built vessels for the Irish Sea, the Channel, and the coastal trade. By 1838, ship owners were ready to challenge the Atlantic. From the humble riverboats to the mighty ocean liners, steam had conquered the seas. What began as a clumsy experiment on canals and rivers was now an unstoppable force, driving ships across the Atlantic and around the world. The age of steamships was flung wide open, a new chapter in the story of human endeavor on the world's oceans. But the journey of steam was still far from over. The world had yet to see what wonders lay ahead as steamships evolved, grew in power, and transformed not just transportation, but the very way we lived, traded, and connected across continents.